Good evening. I'm Jeff Spence from the Office of Alumni Relations at Thomas Jefferson University. I'm happy to welcome you to tonight's online talk exploring the future of work. Tonight, Chris Miciek will discuss the nature of work and its future. We'll explore the evolution of work and how today's rapidly changing world may shape the workspaces of the near and far term. Throughout tonight's talk, we invite you to share any questions you have using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. If you see the button, try moving your cursor. And now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Chris Miciek. Chris began his career as an executive coach before moving into higher education. He's been a pioneer in online technology and its use in career development and advising, having begun the first completely online career center in the US in 2002. Chris has presented at several regional, state, and national conferences, and this year will deliver a podcast for the National Association for Colleges and Employers, as well as a conference workshop, both on AI and the future of work. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for joining us this evening. So I was very pleased and humbled to receive the invitation from the Alumni Association to speak on this. It's something that I've been thinking about since 2002 when I started that first venture into delivering career development, career services online. It's been very surreal the past few months watching a lot of my peers and colleagues in the field venture into territory that I'd been in back then. And it's nice to see the technologies improve significantly in some ways, and we've done a lot to keep people at the center of things. So this is a huge topic, the future of work, how COVID might be reshaping things that we thought we knew a few months ago about the future of work and so on. I'm going to strive to give you a bit of an overview on things. Please do use the Q&A time so we can delve into things that are of particularly pressing or of interest to you as well. So think of this as the overview, the intro to a rather weighty tome for us to dig into and hopefully contribute to shaping ourselves. So, as with most things, we can best understand where we are and where we're headed by taking stock of our journey so far. To look at the future of work, we must first consider the history of thought around work, how we relate to it, and how that shapes our decisions and institutions. For the purpose of this talk, I'll focus on the two primary shapers of Western culture when it comes to work. This is not to ignore the significant contributions and nuances on the nature of work from the global community. It is to focus on the fact that we daily operate within a principally Western influenced context. So we need to start with the ancient Greek and Roman mythos. There, the gods did not work, they sought leisure. Leisure was the highest end. Work was something that was for mortals. And this thinking then carries down among the Greek philosophers and so on. So to the ancient Greeks, they viewed work as base, and leisure was the highest occupation of one's time. And within that, there becomes layers of what is acceptable, what is good in terms of how you spend your time. To be a thinker was obviously then superior to being a laborer. Aristotle even defends slavery as a natural state because some people simply cannot attain to a higher level of thought and self-management. Now, if we think of the history, if we think of Western civilization, and then we look at these origins, we start to see some things emerge that there were very early roots in this thinking. So that's what we inherit from the Greeks and the Romans and their culture. But we want to contrast this with the Judeo-Christian creation story, in which the God there is a working God. The opening chapters, the opening verses of Genesis is a creative process that we're invited to see. But it's a creative process that's that uses hands-on language as part of that process. This isn't mere thought becoming reality. There's an expression of fashioning that's happening as well. There's a craftsmanship that's occurring. So then this worker God creates humans to share in the labor. And in this telling, in contrast to the Greek and Roman perspective, work is elevated. It's not denigrated. And incidentally, the first work a human does in the Genesis account is to name the animals, a process that would involve study of those animals. So the first human profession was as a biologist. Other theories to the contrary. So what do these perspectives mean for us today? First, they influence our language and conversation around work. We express desires for work that has meaning and purpose. We see that as higher than something that we deem to be without purpose or without meaning, or we rank what that meaning or purpose can be. And as we express that, we express our desire for work that has meaning and purpose, but also access to work is deemed and it's limited to few. And when we talk of meaningful work, often some kind of prestige comes with that. We're now living in a moment where many once disregarded workers in our economy are receiving consideration and praise. This could have impact for the future. Suddenly people that were at the lowest rungs of our service economy are now being regarded as something more. We're now paying more attention to what they do. Whether that carries through over the long term remains to be seen. But suddenly, because our cultural moment has shifted, because there is now this threat, we are now viewing and valuing jobs and the workers in those jobs differently in some cases. But still, leisure, retirement, and enjoying the fruits of our labor are the real goals we tend to pursue. And when we regard some work as better than, more meaningful than other work, that lesser work is handed down to others. Those who can unburden themselves by putting undesirable work on the backs of others. This thinking leads to labor castes and stratification. And as we've seen in Western history, it can lead to slavery. If the work needs doing and there is no one willing, someone will be made to do that work. Whether that is through actual slavery or a wage slave condition or tenant farming, there are a lot of, or sharecropper farming, there are a lot of ways this can happen. So it might not be literal slavery, but there is this stratification that happens as a result. And then these assumptions, this way of approaching it, then becomes codified into our society. They become our pay scales, our economic policies. Who gets honored in our societies? Who do we laud? Who do we pay attention to? Some of the highest paid people in our society are people who play for a living. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with that, but we have to think of what are the underlying thoughts behind that? Why do we allow these things to be? Why do we choose these things to be? So think of all the, and with this, it drives even our products and our service development. A lot of our economy is driven by things that are made and marketed as being labor saving. Magic words, and they have been since the 40s, the 50s, even earlier. You know, from kitchen appliances to apps on our phones, labor saving is this special thing. We seek it so we can have more time for what? For leisure. Now, moving quickly to where we're at in the modern moment. With the Greek perspective of work dominant, as we move into the future, we need to pay attention to these other present day factors that are shaping the future of work. and heavily influencing it, both in terms of the context the future of work is being defined in, but also a dominant or presiding assumption about what needs to happen around the space of work. In one form or another, we're all familiar with Milton Friedman's Friedman doctrine that a corporation's highest priority is shareholder value. A whole other webinar can be done on how that shapes up with different value sets being applied in that shareholder value phrase. But we know that for us, this means economic value and profitability. This is not just an economist's theory. It influences our laws. It makes this idea a prime shaper of the landscape of work and the decisions around it. If a CEO can improve shareholder value by laying off 3,000 workers, they are expected to do so, regardless of the impact on the worker's family, and the ripple effects throughout the economy. And never mind that by way of 401ks and 403bs, in a distributed sense, many of those workers are probably shareholders themselves, but not ones with a voice. Now, so the corporate priorities are going to be profit-driven. They have to be because that is the assumption that is around it. Questioning that, that's something that isn't, again, another topic. But then there's also the issue of technological solutionism. Early in my career, I had the privilege of working in an online education environment. For 5 years, I got to explore and I was able to champion technology in educational spaces as platforms to increase human engagement. I am a big fan of technology when done well, and by done well, I mean when done with people, not the technology at the core. The problem posed by techno-solutionism or technology solutionism is that it is tech-centered. It regards all problems as fundamentally technical problems or technological problems, and therefore all problems can be solved with a technological solution at its core. In addition to this, and as a result of that, it has to regard experts in the field that it is addressing the problem in as inferior in their ability to understand and address a problem compared to the programmer or the engineer. But it offers shiny, exciting, quick fixes to recalcitrant, complex, and nuanced problems. It's labor saving. So it often will hold sway, especially in the marketplace where these things are often determined. So why should we train a human, for example, to explore and neutralize their biases as an interviewer when you can just have all your applicants do a video interview that has facial recognition technology and verbal processing software that can evaluate the suitability of a candidate? And I'm not making those things up. Those products are on the market. Some of you have probably encountered them. Some of you have probably worked through them and had to, in job searches, or maybe in companies that are using systems like this. And these are on the increase. So we've looked at our ancient roots. We've looked at the modern moment and two major factors that are shaping things. Another thing that comes along with our current conversations around the future of work is that we are in the fourth industrial revolution. So if we're in the fourth iteration, the fourth go-round for industrial revolutions, we can draw some lessons, hopefully, from the previous three that we've been through. So one of the things to keep in mind is that because society has survived the first three, we often get trotted out that we're in the fourth as a way of defending progress and what's going to happen. Kind of this attitude that it's just going to happen, it's inevitable, let's just let it play out. We're told that we survived the upheaval of the first three, so we'll all be fine. Old, less palatable jobs will be replaced by newer, better jobs. Jobs requiring higher level thought, superior people skills, and so on. This is common in all of the language around us. This view misses critical dynamics and differences and demonstrates the need for good history education. First, the first lesson to take away from the previous three, and that we need to be careful when we're looking at them versus now, is the rate of change is considerably faster than the previous three. Our institutions will have less time to adapt. People will lose access to work and struggle more for access to the necessary transitional education and training at much higher rates than we saw in the previous rounds, in the previous revolutions. If we stop and think about how disruptive COVID-19 has been due to lack of preparation and splintered responses, now apply this more broadly to work. Now, COVID can completely change the game on us. We've been accelerating into these future of work conversations. The speed might change. There are a lot of new dynamics in play, but the trajectory we had as of February meant that speed was probably going to overtake our ability to respond on a large scale to the automation train that was coming. We also know that the previous revolutions were disruptive. So do we dare plan to mitigate the upheaval this time? Will the fourth time be the charm? So far, the only signs, apart from some attempts in the EU, are fragmented and focused on corporations protecting their competitive advantage, training their own workforces so they can retain talent and shore up against their competition. But coordinated and even centralized planning might not be a good idea in response, because rural spaces and populations were less important than the feeding of the factories. So policies encourage that flow from countryside to cityscape. Educational infrastructure was shaped to prepare laborers of various grades, from skilled tradesmen up to managers. The very nature and structures of school and education conform to industrializing the economy each time around. Education became far less about exploring and understanding the old philosophical concept of the good life that we had inherited, and was much more about the good job, assuming the good life would come along with it. The promise to the worker was a better paying job and some increasing latitude in what that work might look like. Do you see ancient Greece echoed in here? A little more, a little higher, more leisure, that's the goal. Maybe it's a better retirement. Maybe it's a little extra vacation time. And finally, we need to acknowledge the cycle that wealth concentration is a part of. And COVID-19 might be accelerating this right now. Again, we don't know, we're so early in this curve. But as capital concentrates with fewer individuals, that power gets challenged by governments responding to public outcry. We've seen this play out every few decades. It might take the form of breaking up monopolies, child labor laws, OSHA standards. A lot of iterations have come about. Labor movements will contribute to the regulatory shift, but they will also engage directly with the wealth holders. Wealth distribution becomes flatter, like in the mid to late 20th century, but then deregulation and similar actions are taken because things are looking good. When wealth concentrates again, and then wealth concentrates again. Knowing the cycle, can we get ahead of it? Can we use the fourth industrial revolution to flatten things and create a more equitable society while still allowing people latitude and the ability to accumulate some measure of wealth based on the work that they've done? So that's where we are. That's kind of where we're at right now. Prior to, some of the things that have been coming on very quickly with COVID and so on. The last couple of things I want to address briefly are the gig economy and a lot of what we hear about the nature of new work and new jobs. First of all, there's a very mixed collection of data on the gig economy. And it takes a lot of deep diving into it to get clear. There's a lot of headline data that gets put out there, but the deep dives often show different things. First of all, depending on how it's measured, the gig economy is actually smaller now than it used to be in the 80s and 90s. We've seen a reduction or a decrease in entrepreneurs, which would have been part of the gig economy statistics. Also, we need to look at what kinds of work are being done in the gig economy. There are the people that are working at the high end as consultants, but there's also a significantly large portion of people that are working for Uber and Lyft and DoorDash, organizations like that, doing either as a sideline for whatever reason to make extra income because of need, or because they're trying to save up for something, or because they need to do that work in a subsistence measure. But the gig economy is not, first of all, a monolithic thing. There's a lot of players in it doing a lot of different things. And if we think the gig economy is going to be the solution where there's going to be freedom, there's a lot of other infrastructure things that need to occur to make that not a pitfall. One of the statistics that I came across while I was preparing for this presentation was that in the last couple of years, when it was measured, 63% of independent contractors, people in the gig economy, 63% had to tap into their life savings to make ends meet versus 20% of standard employees within organizations. And a lot of that has to do with the benefits not being there and other factors. So we cannot look at the gig economy as this universal boon for us. Some of it will be good, but some of it won't be. And we need to be mindful of that. Other thing we need to talk about here is that the automation and AI revolution promises higher levels of work for everyone. The chance to move from teller to financial services provider, per the ATM argument. But this neglects certain populations and realities. In a highly automated future, where our work is augmented by AI and our skill sets will be much more people-focused, where do neurodiverse populations fit in? What work will be available for them? Will they have as much latitude as we're trying to create now? Right now, organizations are becoming more aware that that is a hidden part of the workforce that can be brought in more inclusive environments, and they can contribute while receiving the benefits of being able to do good work. The ATM argument also misses the huge amount of research conducted on people facing robotics. And here I'm talking about the development of caregiver robots. Picture of one's on your screen. This is going on now, and there is huge amounts of money and effort being put into making robots more human, more acceptable to people, and pushing them into those caregiver roles that are traditionally thought of as being human-centered and requiring human skills. And whether they're coming in as an augment to human staff or to replace, it's hard to say. But going back to the Friedman doctrine, if a company can save money by replacing a human with a robot, that decision will be made according to that doctrine, as long as that doctrine stays in place. There was a recent exhibit at the Philadelphia Museum of Art that included pieces showing work being done on this front as well. This is not hidden. It just often doesn't get talked about, that there are human-centered activities, human-centered work that AI and robotics are pushing into. There are even robotics ethicists whose concern isn't the ethics of robots in the workplace or in society. Their concern is making sure robots have rights comparable to humans so that they are not discriminated against by humans that are fearful of them. I'll leave that for you to ponder. But I want to leave us, on this screen, I want to leave us with, if caregiver roles are supposed to be AI-proof, what happens when they're not? And beyond this, think of most of the roles that are human-centered in caregiver capacities. There's a lot of low-wage jobs out there. Are we going to take somebody who is a skilled tradesperson, replace them with automated systems, move them down to a lower wage, lower skilled position than one they held? Are we necessarily going to open up all of the opportunities we think we are? And if we do, will people have access to those and be able to get to them as we move through this process faster than we ever have before? And that sounds a bit dire. But there are bright spots. And like I said, I think that technology can be a boon for us as well. The future of work can be bright for everyone. AI and automation deployed well can improve human flourishing, but we need to create that future and not depend on others to do it for us. So what do we need to do? First, we need to educate ourselves more. There are lots of business press surveys that will go out and ask workers, do they fear automation will take their jobs? And typically the results will be, no, I don't fear automation. We need to question those surveys. How robust are they? Who are they talking to? So on. We need to push back on this. The Reuters Institute at Oxford University did a survey that they released about a year ago for the previous year's journalism coverage of artificial intelligence and automation in British publications. And these findings do extrapolate out into the United States market as well. And they found that 60% or more of the pieces that were written were essentially PR pieces by technology companies or those that had a vested interest in technology companies advancing. The Reuters Institute report went on to be very critical of journalists who they basically said were not doing their job of asking hard questions, of putting in counterpoints in their articles, seeking out the other voices that were there saying, no, there's other perspectives on this. And so educate ourselves. There's a lot of great resources out there, but we need to be thinking more deeply about this and not let it happen to us. We need to advocate for ourselves and others, especially the people and communities most impacted but least consulted about the future of work. The high-tech industries tend to be monocultures in terms of how they think because of where they're coming from in terms of their education. And so a lot of voices are lost in that process. We need to build a repertoire of tech and data skills for ourselves and ensure that those around us are developing them as well. But they should be augmentation to our core skills of our own fields. I, early in my career, had to adapt to using a lot of social media and online tech to do my job as a career counselor. And that was exhilarating. I'm still on that learning curve. I've been using Zoom, obviously using it a heck of a lot more, but Zoom's not the only product. It's learning those nuances. The other day, I was actually working with doing video recordings for briefs that we're going to start putting out for our office on employer data we're gathering right now. So it's learning the new tools, but always keeping those tools as new ways to do what we're experts in, what we've been trained to do, what we have educated ourselves to do. And finally, be careful to not fall prey to automation bias. This is a cognitive bias that's been identified, and it leads us to rely on technology even when we know or should know that it's wrong. It's the expert looking at the computer report and going with the computer report even though there's an error there, and they realize it and they doubt themselves because they think they're more likely to be wrong than the computer system is. So don't fall prey to it. Question it. Steel yourself to ask the hard questions, to always keep that human element in the loop. Now, as far as COVID and what this is doing to us now, we're seeing a lot of people, and there's a lot of speculation on this. And so take what I'm about to share as part of that speculation, but trying to shape some of this to help bring some things together and think through what we're looking at right now. First of all, there is this strong desire to get things back to normal. That's understandable. But one, we need to question, was normal really what we want to return to, or do we take this as an opportunity to improve things as we go forward? Are there lessons we can be learning in this hard time that we can use to reshape our institutions and our processes? That return to normal, in some things there's good signs. Right now, the employers that do heavy college recruiting and grad school recruiting are saying that they're planning on staying the course for this coming year. That the rest of 2020, they're not changing their major hiring plans. That's going to vary industry to industry and types of roles. For the most part, they're saying they're staying that course. That's a good sign, especially for our class of 2020 that's coming out into the job market. It might be slower to get those jobs, but the jobs haven't gone away. And employers are hopeful on that front. Right now, unemployment levels are very high, highest we've seen in a century. But we're going to see recovery. This is probably not going to have an unemployment that persists the same way that it did during the Depression. Also, people that have lost jobs because of COVID have lost jobs in a climate where employers are going to be far more forgiving of gaps in their resumes. So getting a job is not going to be as problematic because this won't be, it won't be seen as a problem that's the fault of the employee. But we need to acknowledge that the recovery is probably going to be a lot faster in some industries and some regions than others. And I'm not talking about places that are rushing to reopen, because that might actually cause more problems down the road, depending on how this plays out. Again, there are a lot of unknowns with the coronavirus itself. But pay attention to your industry. What are the signs around it? And what region you're in if you're not in the Northeast or in the greater Philadelphia area. I know we've got people from all over the country with us tonight. But know what your governments are doing, what's likely to happen, what's the chatter within your own industries and within your own employer. Pay attention to that. Recovery is going to go well in some places, and that's going to be good. Hopefully those will then help drive everything else. But it's going to be really uneven. We've proven that work from home works. Now, most of us probably have stories either first or secondhand of trying to get some kind of work from home policy going. And often employers just didn't want to take that step. It's a huge lift. Even if you don't have a pandemic on your hands, it asks a lot of employers to put in place the training for the work from home employees and for the managers of those employees to make sure everything's getting done the way it needs to be. But there's no argument against it now. We know this. The question is, how are employers going to respond when employees start to say, we want this? We want to work from home 1 day a week or 2 days a week. Some employers are going to be smart about it, and they're going to realize they can actually reduce their real estate footprint. That's great, but it's going to impact real estate markets because now there's going to be a lot of commercial space that can be that will be opened up. What's going to happen with that? Again, unknowns. But what we will see happen is there's going to be a lot of employers that in the past didn't want work from home in the first place. They were too nervous about it. They didn't feel they would have enough control of their employees. Workplace surveillance tech is already a thing. It's out there. Cameras that on your company deployed laptop or in the software you have to have on your laptop will activate your webcam periodically to make sure you're sitting at your workstation or at your laptop. Keystroke monitoring, all kinds of things to keep an eye on the employee. Expect to see this increase. Be mindful of it, be aware of it. We see the same thing happening in ed tech. Same technologies that are being used to monitor students will be and are being used to monitor employees. How this plays out remains to be seen, but that will increase dramatically because the managers and the companies that had cultures of not trusting their workers to do their work, that's not going to change. How that gets expressed, it will change, especially now that they're going to have a hard time building a case that you can't work from home. Work from home, will it accelerate the gig economy? Yes, because there's going to be a lot of people in that unemployment area that are going to be looking to make ends meet. They're going to be looking to fill in time because they've been furloughed, working reduced hours, laid off. So there's going to be a lot of people in the economy looking to fill in. Some of those people are going to be jumping into the delivery sector, the Uber, the Lyft, some, but especially the DoorDash and Instacart, things like that. So that will increase probably only over the short term. So the gig economy will probably get a big boost, but when things calm down and the unemployment rate starts to drop, expect to see that portion of the gig economy recede back to numbers that we saw beforehand. Now, it's possible we could get a real good taste for having everything delivered to us, so we might see it sustain over a longer period of time. And we could see infrastructure come in to shore that up. Again, remains to be seen. My expectation would be that the gig economy will see a big boost on that front only over the short term. Now, a lot of people have been going and trying out new things, learning new things because they've got time. We don't have those commutes, a little extra time on our hands for some. Many of us are also have kids at home and other stressors, so downtime needs to just be downtime. But for those people that are picking up new hobbies, exploring new things, taking online classes and so on, we're going to see a bump in the gig economy as people enter it as ways to add an economic dimension to their hobbies and to these interests that they've developed. So that will probably increase. Some of those will drop off just because as we get back to something resembling what we had before, then their time will dry up and they won't be able to sustain it. Other people will shift more towards that. But I would expect that to also bump, but then come down, but at a slower rate on both the up and down sides than we would see with those service sector gig economy roles. The economic restart overall is going to be uneven, not just because of the industries and the regions where the unemployment is, but we've got different parts of the country talking about reopen plans. Those are going to be different, and we need to be mindful of there's already issues happening. Texas reopened its beaches and immediately saw a spike in cases. We're going to see those kinds of things play out for places that reopen too fast or reopen with very poorly thought out plans. And that is going to be more problematic. If we don't reopen well the first time and we get pushed back because we see spikes, we're going to be spiking cases in an already exhausted healthcare economy. And our people are exhausted already. And they need to have a break, and they're not getting those breaks because we're at capacity in some places. If we bounce back too fast, that overstresses that system. We're going to see breaks even if we started to flatten the curve. But even if we don't, because we're going to have different sectors of the economy coming in and getting back to life faster than others, that's going to make it uneven as well. There's going to be opportunities but there's also going to be losses. We're already seeing strong evidence that real estate markets in urban cores are going to be depressed probably for a few years as people are seeking to move out of the cities, reversing a decades-long trend to move to the cities. So, and that, like everything else, is going to have ripple effects. Think of all the small businesses, restaurants and small service businesses that exist in cities. If those neighborhoods start to go down in population, if the real estate market starts to drop, some of those businesses will also fold as well, shuffling those people as to where they work. And if it's a restaurant and they have a delivery service that they work with, now that delivery service and the people reliant on that as delivery drivers are also going to be impacted, and that could impact go back to impacting our gig economy components. So, but we don't know how this is all going to play out. A lot of it really is going to depend on what the reopen policies look like. I would expect we're going to see some states and regions do it really well. They're going to have fairly smooth transitions, and they'll have good plans in place so that if there's another spike, they'll be able to address it and move forward. Other groups, other locations of the country may not have as strong of plans in place. They're going to spike, and it's going to keep tanking their economies, and it's going to be harder for those places to get their feet back under them, unfortunately. So if you want to know where to invest in real estate, rural places and states that do it right are going to be good places to go for. That was a very rapid overview. Thank you all for hanging with us.
Yes, and thank you so much, Chris. For all of our attendees, if you have any questions, please remember to utilize the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And Chris, we already have a few questions that have come in during the talk.
Great.
Our first is, how do you envision education needing to change in order to prepare students for careers in the changing job market?
On the one hand, yes, education does need to change, both K-12 and higher ed. But even if things play out as ideally as we hope they will with the future of work, with more critical thinking and human-centered, human-focused skill sets, what we need to see is actually a doubling down on liberal arts education and liberal arts cores, because that's where a lot of those skills, the ability to communicate across disciplines, across fields of study, fields of work, ability to assimilate different types of data and work with it, that's going to be necessary for people to remain well-rounded and effective, and also to develop those lifelong learning skills that they need. But we need to come alongside that with better technology skills. Frankly, coding, at least basic coding classes, should be part of the communications core for every school, and starting that in the elementary or middle school level. Every kid should know how basic coding works so they can understand the machines they're using. Why does it do what it does? You know, it's one thing to know how to post something to TikTok. It's another thing to understand why that works the way it does. And then you have more control over the tool rather than the tool having control over you. So it's a basic literacy issue, but it's understanding what literacy means now has evolved because we've evolved our environment around us. So yes, there does need to be changes, but at heart, I think we need to remain focused on, but articulate better the value of kind of the traditional core.
Wonderful, excellent. Wait, another question is, do you know or have you come across any trainings or certificate programs that you think would be useful for alumni to take advantage of to help set them apart in the post-COVID job search?
I haven't come across any just yet. Those will be emerging very quickly, so keep an eye out. But the best thing to do is either know And in a moment, I'm going to make a shameless plug for the career centers at Jefferson. But one, know your industry, your field, or the direction you want to be moving in, and pay attention to that space. What are the emergent skills that are being valued? And pay attention to those. Time for the shameless plug. The career centers at Jefferson are a lifetime resource for alumni for free. Work with us on that. If there's that unknown space of what does my next step need to look like, we're here to help you with that. So I'm happy to have that conversation and get into the specifics. But LinkedIn is a great place to start. Do informational interviews with people in your field that are a little higher up. Have those conversations with your peers. Pay attention to your professional associations and what they're focusing on, so that you can zero in on what's going to be critical for where you're at. But speaking of broad skills, same thing as I said to the previous question. If you don't know some basic programming, Java's not that difficult to pick up. There's a really great online course that was released by, I want to say Finland. It's in English. But an EU country released it, so all of their citizens and anybody else can access it and learn the basics of artificial intelligence. So looking for those things to get an understanding, again, of the tools that we're working with, so we're conversant in it. That's going to be universally valuable. If you're not a master of Excel or working with data, pick up some of that as well. That's always going to be useful. Not just so that you can work with the data, but that you can also ask hard questions of the data when somebody else presents it and bring the narrative to life, bring the full view of what's going on. Because, there's lies, damned lies, and statistics. So, we want to make sure that we're getting at what's really going on with the numbers somebody's handing out.
We have another question wondering if you're seeing any research yet about any industries that you think may not be able to come back post-COVID. Or not come back in the same way, at least.
Yeah. Airlines are going to really be troubled for a long time. They're going to have a hard time bouncing back. Some of it is because, the industry might bounce back, but there are going to be some carriers that probably get hit harder. But there already wasn't a lot of love lost between passengers and airlines before this. And some airlines don't seem to have figured out they've got to change the way they treat passengers. And I think we're just going to be slow to move back because we're not seeing great treatment out there at this time for the people that do have to still travel. Real estate will be depressed in urban areas, like I mentioned. I think we're going to see an increase in ed tech and work tech, the stuff like Zoom that's supporting us. We're going to see that stuff increase. We'll probably see increases in supporting tech sectors as well. The Verizons, Comcast, and the others that provide the infrastructure and the backbone for the internet. I think we're going to see a lot of mom and pop stores lost. If we don't reopen our local and regional economies well, we're going to lose a lot of small businesses, and that's going to be hugely problematic for the workforce, not so much for industries, because that's where a lot of people have their first job and where they start to get those skills that they build on that become the people skills. I mean, anybody who in high school waited tables started developing their interpersonal skills that could make them successful when they graduate from college and have to negotiate their way through a board meeting or a committee meeting or something like that. But I don't think we're looking at, to reference the Simpsons, the loss of amalgamated spats or buggy whips. I don't think we're going to see anything like that die off, but I think we're going to see some industries really hurting. Tourism related will probably be the biggest hit, but some of them could bounce back. strong because people are just so sick of being in their houses. They want to get out. So we could be surprised, but a lot of it's going to depend on how people are feeling economically and where we're at when we start to emerge from this.
Absolutely. I think we have time for just one more question. So I'll try to summarize a few questions into one here. In the industries that have been deemed non-essential in a lot of ways, of our retail, home goods, things of that nature, how do you see those industries being impacted? And what might be the opportunities for workers in those fields moving forward, opportunities in the green economy, for example?
Sure. Yeah, that is a lot of questions in there. I think if you're in a retail sector like home goods, if I were in management level, and if you're not, this is something to push up to management. Can you deliver online classes? Do it yourself. Move into a new space with what you do. Classes on home decor, design, things that you can be working with your customer base now, maybe for free, maybe small fee, to keep them primed as customers, but engage them in a new way. Could be one thing that could be done to keep them, part of it's just keeping active at this time and using this as an opportunity to engage in new ways. We've seen tech sector do that. We've seen ed tech do that. We've seen education do that, not really well because we didn't get any warning on this, but that's a way that we can go. As far as green tech, huge opportunities for that because people are now more aware of how much impact we've been having on the environment. I mean, think of how people lit up the internet because there were dolphins back in Venice. So things like that, it's capitalizing on that and keeping people's attention on this slowdown has been good for some things. And how do we press into those benefits, and how do we expand those sectors of our economy? How do we expand those industries? I mean, if you're in wind or solar or something like that, man, this is a huge opportunity to say, look, people, we took a break and it was good. How do we make this even better? So I'd love to see some creativity happen on that front because we could really, this time next year, we could be looking at things very differently and a much better place for us to live and work on this planet.
Wonderful. That's a great silver lining, positive way to end tonight's talk. So thank you again, Chris. We've really appreciated your time and your expertise. And I hope that everyone has enjoyed the presentation and found it very helpful in their own work and the future that they're approaching. We want to encourage you to join us for some of our other upcoming alumni online talks, which you can find at jefferson.edu/alumni events. This week, we continue our Workout Wednesday series tomorrow at 12:15, where we'll be working with Lindsay Dunstan from the physical therapy class of 2009, who will lead us through some exercises using your body weight. Tomorrow evening, Dr. John Lauriello from our Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior will host the Meet the Chair event virtually online from 7 to 8 p.m. And then on Thursday, Rams alumni and fans are invited to join our athletic director, Coach Tom Shirley, for a talk about the athletics program and its future in the age of coronavirus. Again, you can sign up for these at jefferson.edu/alumni events. We also invite you to support Jefferson's COVID-19 Better Together Fund by visiting jefferson.edu/COVID funding. The Better Together Fund has been established to provide support from the Jefferson community to our students and employees to help them adapt to the ever-changing circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. We thank you again for participating. If you are interested as well in connecting with Chris or with Jefferson's career centers, you can find information on that at jefferson.edu/alumni. Thank you, stay safe, and be well.
Thank you. Good night.